I often give the analogy of a road, right? So they pave out nature with the asphalt, right? And so there's, this 50, 60 feet wide asphalt, and so, if it's a smaller road on a country rural area, then they don't go further than that, right? They just pave that. But most roads, right, if they're multi-lane, right, especially if they're two-way, right, you have to define a center line, right? And it's some form of dotted, white dash or yellow, depending on the country, right? And so if you have this road and then you define a center line, again, it's an abstraction, right? Why do you do that, right? In order to have, this control of the flow of traffic left to right, right? And so, or multi-lanes, right? Stay in the fast lane or, the slow lane, right? So you have this kind of limitation for safety, right? Now, it's just kind of funny. Sometimes I think, well, is the point then after you define a center line to then always to drive on the center line, right? So that's like, if you have the center line, so then I must strike on the center line, right? It becomes sort of fetishized, right? And it sort of becomes like a leash. And I don't want to strike off the center line because, these strikes, right, are the most efficient, shortest distance, right? So it's I think it's an oversimplification. It's where things move to, so it's kind of simplistic rather than simple. The center line is a good, simple and useful concept. But if you reduce the whole, reality of martial interaction to interaction on the center line, right? And it's very nice, right? Like, oh, all I have to do is hit on the center line, and it's kind of like you said earlier, like overextension of a concept, beyond its range of practicality, right? It becomes sort of a faith. I believe in the center line, so wow, right? And again, you may be lucky, and that it's like a religion, right? Okay, fine, believe in that, right? But some, let's say, philosophies or religions or even kind of scientific hypotheses incorporate more complexity, right? And so that kind of so the first way of using the center line is simply as an abstraction. Yes, I need it's useful to know the shortest distance between me and the opponent at this longest reach of my arms, right? Because the arms are most dexterous as a striking weapon, versus the legs. Good. So do I then go further and say, then that means I must always hit on the center line, right? And some even restrict the center line, right? What I'm saying here is like, as long as there's a target, there's a center line, as I defined. Some restrict that and say the center line is perpendicular to the plane of the shoulders, right? So it's shooting out 90 degrees here, right? So if my opponent is to my side, in order to punch, I have to turn, right? And I have to always have my center line, in this case, restricted to 90 degrees, orthogonal to my chest before I strike, right? To me, that's getting a bit limitation, right? That means if this is my center line and I only strike on my center line here and my opponent's there, then I can't hit like this. I can't hit laterally towards them. And to me, that's restricting the beautiful sort of dexterous potential of the human biomechanics, right? Why then start limiting that way, right? And then even this further idea of then some people say not only the fist, but the elbow has to press onto the center line, right? So I think it's artificially, in some contexts, yes, having the elbow towards the center. Now we're talking about vertical midline is good because you want to displace something hitting there. But then when you punch, right, to push the elbow, in the middle, to me that actually is limiting in different ways, right? It's actually against our biomechanics, right? And you lose range. You lose range by keeping your elbow on the center, right? Here, if I keep my elbow in the center, it's locked, right? Yeah. And once I start and I cannot leave the elbow, right? If I leave the elbow from the center line, I violate the center line principle, right? Whereas you're thinking, well, I just want to maximize the reach of my strike. Of course, my elbow has to come off the center line in that case. Yeah. So again, useful in a range, just like the hammer, right? But when we're in a different range, maybe you choose a different kind of concept, or you're not so fixated.
Yeah, and some guys, they don't have the flexibility, and like some guys have broad chests, and they can't, no matter how hard they try, they can't do it because I'm a pretty slim guy. I can do that, but
Right.
a lot of guys can't do it. Maybe that's why they say, it's feminine martial arts for,
Yeah,
invented by female, whatever. But and even some people, they think it's protection, right?
Mhm.
So protect this, this, which in my mind, I thought about this and I was like, that's probably the easiest part on your body to protect. I mean, and a lot of other martial arts, they don't have, they have this similar concept of center line. Actually, you could practice Taekwondo and have better protection. You just turn to the side and have your butt sticking out, and you can
Oh yeah,
protect the
yeah. Protect
protect the center line.
this area.
Yeah,
Yeah,
protect that
exactly.
area.
Yeah, so I mean, I use the metaphor of, different institutions of doctrine, right? Be them political or cultural or religious, right? Over time, especially if you don't interact with, outside kind of groups or organization, you tend to get a bit narrow. It's like inbreeding, and then your concepts only work within that small bubble, right? And so I know that's the critique of so-called traditional martial arts, right? I value tradition, but I like innovative traditions. I like traditions that are always renewing and creative, right? It's not just that he or she, said, the so-called great grandmaster said it that way 8 generations ago, and we have to do it exactly like he or she said. And the problem with that is like, that person is not alive anymore, and so it was transmitted, and hopefully there was fidelity, right? That from master to disciple. But the telephone game, right? You're sitting at a party and you tell your friend on the right side in their left ear, something, blah blah blah, and they pass it on. By the time it comes back around, it's completely different, right? And
Yeah.
so maybe it's better with video, kind of footage. But nowadays, again, like I said, you have 5 people watching the same video or movie, and they have different interpretations. So even recording,
Mhm.
if we recorded the Grandmaster, from 200 years ago, and we're trying to learn from that video, we would still argue. Yeah, and so ultimately, you have to make sense of it for yourself, and even test out these kind of heuristics and algorithms that we're kind of offering here. And so this insistence of kind of trajectory on the center line only, that's crossing a line, kind of pun intended.